let's get started. Today we're talking about the company imports, meaning importing all of your clients, stations, and we'll get into a little bit of outsourced products as well. So on the setup steps, we're importing the customer record. On this company record, if we look at what we can import into it from our spreadsheet, these are our column headers that a lot of common headers. I'll go through more of them with you shortly. And this is your fields that are generally imported. Now, certain things do not have to be filled in, meaning if I don't put in a payment term, it's going to default to whatever your default payment terms are in the system. However, if I want to say they're net 30, etc., then I would put that. There's also, some people won't put payment terms, but they will put our tax exempt. And there's a tax exempt field which would just be true or false. So in this case, some fields you don't need, as I said. If you don't have an email address, that's fine. If you don't have a phone number or a contact, it will still import it, but it's going to start throwing in nag screens anytime you try to edit or do anything with that company. It's going to turn around and tell you you need to have a contact and a phone number for that company. So if something isn't filled in that's required, it will then kind of nag you to finish it when you go to use that particular company. Now, looking at this in a spreadsheet, when we fill it in a spreadsheet, you'll see my column headers. I don't have them all. You don't necessarily need them all. There's ones that this is just a sample. You'll see tax exempt is true or false, email, ship to. What you really want to make sure here is you don't have any extra spaces. They just create more headaches. So I don't want spaces between my columns. I don't want spaces between my header and my other one. Then I'm going to go through and clean it out. If there's any additional fields, we just looked at those columns of fields, I'll just add them and fill them in. Some things will be easier to do in this format than they will once they're in the system, because then you have to go through each client record to adjust it. Once we have our list set up, now QuickBooks, we will save this file, save as, and we want to save it as a tab delimited file. So you'll see that as one of your options, tab delimited, and it will save that file. Now in this scenario, I already have it saved. And then we're going to close this so that it doesn't interfere. Now that we've saved it, we have to close it, or Excel and Control can't use it at the same time. So now in Sirius, I'm going to go to Tools, Import Data, Import from Text Files. To begin with, we're going to pull in our source file. Wherever you've saved that source file, you can select it. And you'll see all the fields line up down the left-hand side and the values of the first one in the field. You can scroll through because you may not have all the fields filled out. Then I'm going to choose a template to bring it in. What we're bringing in at this point are companies. This is actually listing every field that is in a company record that you can bring in. From this field, I am taking the one on the right, selecting the one left, selecting the one on the right that matches it, and adding the link. And that way I am building the map between the two. Now, in this scenario, you'll see I have area code separate than the phone number. So I'm going to select my area code, and hit add link. And then my phone number. If your phone number is combined, area code and phone number, that's formatted number. Either one will work. And then I'll add link. As I'm going through adding these links, now this is contact, your March. Again, that's one name. So under my contacts, depending on how you have it listed, first name, last name, first name, last name, this is a combined column, so I'm going to add that. Now once you've mapped all of these fields, it's a good idea that you save this map. Because once you've saved the map, if there's an issue or something doesn't work right, you can just go right back and load the map file. In this case, I'm just going to load my sample map file that I've already created for this file, so I don't have to go through each one. And you'll see the maps that it's created. Now, in this scenario, as I scroll through, it will also show you what that means, what it's going to do with each one of those values based off the preview. Once that is mapped, I'm just going to hit save. And it's going to pull in all of these companies that I have in my list. This list is only about 100 clients. It shouldn't take long for 100 clients. I will let you know as it runs, it stops every 100 and verifies what it's imported and then starts up again. That's intentional because if it finds an error in the error invalidation, it's just going to stop. Now once these companies are imported, we'll go take a look at them. Alright, so we have the companies imported. So now if I go to explore companies, they will all be there as long as prospect is checked. Because we just imported these companies, but it's to control, they're only a prospect until an order has been placed. So if I pull up a company record, a client is someone that has an order in the system, a prospect is basically everybody else. You'll notice that prospect is checked and not client. It's because they are not clients. They have no orders in the system. However, they can still all be used, and as soon as an order has been placed, okay. How does the process vary? I had a question on vendors. It really doesn't. The only thing different is that in a vendor, what I want is one of these fields that is vendor that says yes or that says true or false. So if I have the same list, but in my spreadsheet had a column for vendor, it would just be true if they were a vendor, false if they weren't, and that way when you checked it, we just can't close this. Let's do another one so I can show you the fields. Active is prospect, his vendor is in here as well. Is a vendor would be the column. So if I had a column in here that was vendor, true, false, it would automatically put them in as a vendor. Client does not need to be false. You could have a client and a vendor be the same person. You may buy to the same person you sell from. So one company would fulfill both. Client doesn't have to be false or blank either. You could define a client on the import as a client, and it will check it. It'll confuse it as a client instead of a prospect on import as long as you have the field in here, which is his client, and check true or false. It will import it that way as well. But by default, everybody is a prospect. But I could have a column that is client that's marked true. All right. A little more about the import. Let's say I was going to re-import this complete listing. I just deleted my map. But anyway, if I was going to go in and do this whole import again, maybe I imported it and I had a column wrong and something went bad, so therefore all my phone numbers are in the wrong column. Or something happened where I didn't map this. You can do a second map over the first one. If I do nothing at this point, it would duplicate everything. I would have two of everything. However, in the advanced settings up at the very top left, You can also change the file format. Currently, I'm pulled in a tab delimited. If your file is done as a comma delimited or a CSV file, then I would choose comma delimited, and it would correct, it would give you the right view here. The next one that I really want to talk about is look up records before importing. If I said match this on the company name, update with imported data, it's going to replace my first import with this import because I told it to match it and update it. Ignore it will just ignore all the import information for companies that already exist compared to replacing that information. And these are in the advanced options under setting. Typically you won't need them. You're not usually importing more than once, but you might. If you have a couple clients who did a quick import of their basic data and realized, it would have been easier if I just would have gone into the spreadsheet and told all the details that I want and do another import. This is also how this would do the same thing. You're just replacing it. Just do not forget to tell it to look it up or you'll get double entries of everything. Now, that being said, if we want to delete a company out of the system, you can do that as well. Pull up a company record and hit delete. Okay. However, you have to reassign it to another company, meaning if they have orders or estimates or nothing, the system doesn't necessarily know the difference, it has to be able to reassign all those orders to a new company or all those estimates to a new company because you can't delete the orders. I can delete the company. And therefore what it would say is just if they have no record, it really doesn't matter. Okay, I'm reassigning all the old contacts and company to the new company and it will delete that company record. So if you do get into it after you clean and need to clean out some stuff that doesn't really work, just go delete them out from here. Notice that it will require you to realign it to another company that's in the system. No, leaving it blank would not be a problem. It'll just be there'll be a prospect as well as a vendor. It's pretty much the case for all vendors. It's just a question I had is leaving it blank as far as any of the imports. Next thing I want to talk about, if there's no further questions on the import, is I want to talk about production stations and stations as a whole, not only production stations. I will let you know, depending on your version that you're running, there are two different ways to get to production or stations. I am currently in 4.6, so where I'm going is setup and system setup. If you're in 5.1, you will see another button next to setup called production. They basically will lead to the same place. If I go to system setup in 4.6, you will see a tab for production. The only real difference is this becomes its own button in 5.1. Here you will see all the stations. Now these are the stations that are active in the system. If I check show inactive, it will show all the stations. When you get your system, most of the stations are inactive. It's giving you the primary stations but not the substations. What I like to use is design as my reference. A couple reasons. Design is something that your designers are typically sitting at a computer all day. So therefore they may control their own stations to a more in-depth level than someone in production who would have to walk to a computer and change it each time. In this scenario we have a station that's called InDesign. It is currently only used in the work in progress station. We're not designing something once it's built, and we're not designing it once it's a sale. However, you may use design in an estimate. If you do designs in the estimate phase before you give the estimate, so you have to create an estimate, send it to the designer, then send it out as a quote, then you're going to use design in the estimate as well. Is it a line item station or just an order station? Now a line item station means it is tracked on each individual line in an order. So if I pull up a particular order, there is a station that is going both with this one line item, and there is a station that goes with the overall order. Either can be used, depends on what's going to work best in your shop. Meaning, do I want to track this wide format print product separate from the vinyl product that may be on the same order, or do they all flow together? And you can even use a combination of them both. Maybe the whole order goes into one location, but then it breaks out as well. So when creating stations, it needs to know, is this a line item station? Will it mark the line item complete when it's done? So if I'm tracking through production on a line item, once that line item gets to a certain area, I could say that line item is done. Because I could move the line item to be shipped. And that way, that to be shipped would mean the line item is complete. Now, clocking in and out of stations, there are stations that will be used only for the time clock, and therefore it wouldn't have WIP, wouldn't have anything. And those would often be lunch, smoke break, things to that nature. If someone can clock into that station, it also wants to know, are they paid or not paid in that station. So for lunches, things of that nature, they of course would not be paid, or may not be paid. Show for production terminal. If you're using production terminal, this then is used within production terminal as well. Now, as far as my design is concerned, if I look at my inactive ones, you'll see that I'm breaking down design in a little bit more detail. Because I may, once an order comes in, it may go into the queue for the designer. And then the designer may change it to in progress. He may put it on hold. But that way he can control his own workflow, or their own workflow, immediately seeing what's in queue, what's in progress, what's waiting to be put on hold. Now, a lot of these move back to the dashboards, meaning these designs, when using dashboards, not going to get into it real heavy today, we'll get into it in future, what you're generally going to be doing is I could then put in like a line item explorer on my dashboard that is sorted only by orders in design waiting for approval. And I could do a number of them. And that way, based off of that sort, station is in design. Now, I haven't turned on the other ones yet. So now this is only showing line items that are currently in design. I could do another one that would say, and you're building out whatever you use for in your system. These dashboards are saved by individuals, so if I'm a designer, I may have a very different dashboard than I do for somebody else. To maintain these dashboards, you're basically adding an instrument. There are many, many instruments. If you look at the different dashboards, these are all the different ones. I'm not going to go into all the dashboard setup today. This, again, is a session kind of on its own. More using them within things. So once I've added a type of component, this instrument, then you can edit that instrument and tell it what you want it to do. In this scenario, I could give it a name. I just want it to show all that are in design. Now, if I don't do estimates or anything, I should say just orders that are in design. That are in work in progress. I don't really need all statuses. I only want to see the things that are in work in progress and in design. And then you just save it again and it will close. Now, looking at this from Explorer as well, if I'm exploring orders, you'll have a sub-explorer. You can also do this with dashboards, create one dashboard component that affects another. In this scenario, if I'm looking at an order, I have my line items at the bottom. There is a status and a station. If I go to column chooser, this will be slightly different in 5.1, how this column chooser works, just to let you know. There's a status and there is a station. I'm going to move that all up a little bit so I can see it better. This is my station. You'll see there's a station on the order and a station on the line item. A right mouse click, I can change that station for just this particular line item is now in design. Up at the top, my station could be somewhere else, and it will only show the stations that are applied to the order that it's in. We're in built, so it's just showing me built stations. I'm in design, etc. So they're each independently controlled. Now when I'm looking at something that's in design, station to in design, back on that sample, it's now showing the orders that are in design. Again, this could be, you set this to refresh on certain intervals and manually refresh it. But now once I'm done, I could just say change the station to in production. So you're doing your whole production flow from one screen. Once I'm done with it in design, I will say it's change station to in printing, or it may be change it to in design waiting on hold. It might be whatever that next station is. Back to the stations themselves. So these are the different stations that are currently in the system. I recommend you just kind of go through and turn on and off the ones you think you may or may not want to use. I do recommend that you start small, meaning I don't necessarily need complete, in progress, queues, scheduled, etc. So, but in printing in queue, in progress, scheduled, this really depends. If I have a production manager that tries to schedule, that wants to maintain the schedule on the printers and things of that nature, it may not go just into printing. It may go into to be scheduled so that it immediately pops up on your production manager screen, and so they can schedule it accordingly. And then he would say it's in progress once it's scheduled, or in queue, depending on how you think about it. Again, these aren't necessarily turned on by default, because for a small shop, this becomes, you got to find a balance. You don't want your employees stopping every 3 minutes to go change things if they have to walk across the floor. So in printing may be good enough, or in production may be good enough, depending on what you want it to do. You may not use in vinyl in printing, you may just use in production. However, you can define, add new ones up at the top, new department, new sub-level. Reconfiguration just allows you to move everything around. Now, these are stations. Do not get them confused with statuses. There are only 4 real statuses in the system, and you cannot control them. They are pending, which is an estimate. They are work in progress, built, sale, are the only ones that you really control. You're marking something built, sale. Now there is another status which is complete. That is when it is a sale and paid for in full. You cannot determine that. The system has to determine that based off of when it's paid and when it's a sale. So looking at orders, I have my status and my station. Basically, a station is a subset of the status, because if I go in and change status, I can also change the station at the same time. So by saying this status is in build to be shipped, it's changing both my status and my station together. And that's the subgroup under the statuses. It's the only ones you can really change, from WIP or to sale. Compared to the station, we'll just show you the stations that for the status that you're currently in. Alright, the next thing I want to talk about is outsourced goods and how we handle that, different ways of handling that. In our system, if we're in a new estimate, You'll see a category for outsource. You'll also see one miscellaneous. Again, these can be cloned and renamed in anything you want. So if I'm always outsourcing t-shirts, I may create my own product called t-shirts, just cloning this outsourced item. So if I have to call and get a quote, all you're doing is really putting in a name of what it is that you want, quantity ordered, what your cost is per piece, if you're going to mark them up, and of course you can fill in any of this information and then type it out. Very straightforward. It will pull in a part, just subcontracted goods, so that it's tracking costs behind it based off of what you've entered in as your cost and your price. This to me is the quickest way. Got to make a phone call, throw something in, and keep going. Now this product could be set up to automatically pull prices based off your outsourced items as well. We'll get into setting up these products a little later, but in the short term, I could have these miscellaneous samples are really in the system to be cloned, to be copied, and create whatever you want to create. You know, if I'm using a price list sample, it's basically the same product as your outsourced. The only real difference is in this list, you will see that it has a price and a cost. So therefore, pulling up something is automatically going to fill out my price and cost. So if I get a listing from somebody on what they sell me, and I wanted to put, BTTs or $5 a piece, or whatever it is, you can put in your cost and just build a table off of those. And that's how we do kind of the outsourced items that are just your supplier gave you a price list. The other way to do that would be if you were inventorying items. Instead of maybe having just a price list, I really want to put those t-shirts into inventory and pull and retrieve those from inventory. Well, that's what we're using this miscellaneous dynamic list for. It is basically the same thing, except you'll notice that it is a dynamic list pulling in specific parts. So I could have my parts for shirts all listed, and it would physically pull those parts, replacing its cost, etc., with what you have on the actual physical part. And this is just selling parts one up, retail. You're not doing any more production to it. You're not just one up, back and forth. And that's generally how outsourced items are done, either just a quick outsource or miscellaneous type product, or created in advance for things you resell often. I would like you to start preparing your list to be imported. If you're uncomfortable trying it yourself, I recommend you send that list to your point person and have them look it over. They can even do a sample import into one of our databases. However, I will let you know, as long as this company name is mapped right, we can repair any damage, because we can re-import it over again as long as we have something to match it with. However, if this company name does not match, meaning you missed the whole field for company name when you do the import, that creates kind of a nightmare to go in and strip it all out, because we have no way of telling it to replace anything. We have to just go strip it all out and redo it. And then that's a tech support call to get them to do that. So just make sure the company, no matter what you do, is lined well, and then we can easily correct everything. I thank everyone for joining me today. Talk to you soon.